And right now it's time for that time when we have our special guest. Tonight's special guest is John Galvin. Next week it's the Melbourne Cup, where the nation stops for a day to enjoy the pleasures of thoroughbred racing. John makes his living as a thoroughbred syndicator and knows his horses. And he is here tonight to help us baby boomers make sense of the 24 horses in the Cup. John picks the top 9 horses that you should not ignore in next week's Melbourne Cup. We welcome John Galvin as our special guest on The Beat Goes On. John Galvin, welcome.
Glad to be here, Jared.
Welcome to The Beat Goes On. John, coming up in 1 week time is the Melbourne Cup. And that's why you're sitting in that seat tonight, John, because we need to know who's going to win this Melbourne Cup so we can put some money on it and make some money.
Exactly, Jared, exactly. The race that stops a nation.
Can you do it for us, John? Do you think you can?
I'll do my best, Jared.
Now, if anybody knows about horses, well, it's got to be you, doesn't it? Because you're a thoroughbred syndicator.
Correct.
For our audience out there, very quickly, what is it?
Well, what we do, Jared, is we go to horse sales, yearling sales, and buy young horses, well-bred, athletic types. We then put a package together and sell shares in that syndicate to the public. And then we have those horses trained and ridden by some of the best people in New Zealand, and I manage the syndicate. That's how it works.
And what a great idea, because, look, to own a racehorse by yourself, you're talking $200,000 for a racehorse, and then the training fees, it's a bit hard on the pocket. But the thrill of of owning a racehorse, you can join in with another 25, 30 people,
Correct.
Share the costs, but still get exactly the same thrill when you win. Isn't that wonderful?
It is wonderful. We won $1 million race at Riccarton in 2008 with one of our horses,
Wow.
Telltale. And we had 27 people in that syndicate, and as far as they were concerned, they owned 100% of the horse, even though they owned a small part.
Champagne was flowing.
It was indeed.
John, we'll talk about syndication in just a moment, but let's talk about the Melbourne Cup, because that's what you're in here today to do. What a fabulous race. I've followed it every year. My loyalty to the Melbourne Cup. It's just one of the days when I knock off and go to a pub or a race course and just wallow in that fabulous day. And it all started back in 1861.
Correct.
150. This is the 152nd race.
That's correct.
So, John, you've followed it more closely than I have, probably, haven't you? So, what's your feelings about the Melbourne Cup?
Indeed. Well, it did start in 1861. On the first day, the first running, the prize was a gold watch.
Now it's a bit different now.
Now it's $6 million Australian dollars as the prize, 3.3 million Australian to the winner. There were 4,000 people attended on the first day.
4,000.
And the secretary of the club at that time was all male members in those days, of course, gave each of the male members 2 tickets to give to ladies, on the assumption that wherever the ladies went, the men would go. And some things never change, do they?
You did right.
And of course, the real point about the Melbourne Cup for New Zealanders is the great, fantastic record that New Zealand bred and owned horses have had in the Melbourne Cup over that 152 years.
Well, we've done well, haven't we?
We have done well. 42 New Zealand bred horses have won the race, which is a pretty good percentage. 19 of those have been New Zealand owned, so actually owned in New Zealand. And 28 of those winners have come in the last 50 years.
Now that's the big statistic, isn't it? So we've had some beauties, but I will say a note of caution or a warning here. It's 2005 since our last win, so that's 2007, isn't it?
2007.
So that's 5 years since we. So is the ill wind of change blowing over us, or?
Well, it's a complicated story, but Efficient was the last New Zealand bred horse to win the Melbourne Cup in 2007, and the last New Zealand owned horse was the Great Ethereal in 2001, who won the Caulfield Cup as well. But there's been some changes in the Melbourne Cup in recent years, and changes that haven't found universal flavour or favour. The Victorian Racing Club, in its wisdom, has really courted the European horses. They've changed the qualifying rules. And it's much, much harder for New Zealand horses to get an automatic qualification for the New Zealand Cup now. Indeed, for Australian horses also. So this year's running...
Are they taking our race away from us?
Well, there is a point of view that says that for sure. The battler with it's a handicap, so therefore horses get weighted according to their ability and their record. And historically it's been a battler's race. You know, the mug trainer from the bush can bring his horse to town and win the Melbourne Cup.
And that's the great story of Kiwi, isn't it?
Yes,
So
it
why
is.
don't we pause just for a second. Tell us the story of Kiwi again. What a wonderful story.
Kiwi, who was a farm-trained horse from Waverley, trained by the late Snowy Lupton.
A farm-trained horse.
Yeah, he'd been bought, apparently, these stories are a bit like fishing stories, they get bigger as time goes along, but apparently he'd been bought as a horse to round up sheep on the farm. He was a thoroughbred. I think they paid $1,000 for him, but they noticed that this horse actually could gallop, so the theory came up, let's try him at the races. So they took him to Wanganui and he won a race, and then he went on from there, and won the 1983 Wellington Cup in January, and then went to Melbourne and later in the year in November. And of course, I think most New Zealanders who were around at that time remember that wonderful barnstorming finish by Kiwi coming down the outside.
Look, I was there, you were there. Why don't we have a quick look at Kiwi winning the Melbourne Cup, 1983?
That's it. Look
What
for
a
the
year.
horse in the middle of the track coming
Yeah.
down the outside.
Murray has
Like-
reached the lead. It's Kia Murray showing the way. Noble Comet after him. Mark Vogel trying to cling to them. Mr. Jazz and Triumphal March running on well with No Peer and Veloso. 200 to go, and Mr. Jazz has stormed up on the outside to take the lead from Noble Comet, and then Kia Murray and No Peer. Noble Comet's fighting back. He's gone to Mr. Jazz again. It's Mr. Jazz, and here comes Kiwi out of the blue, and Kiwi's got up. Kiwi's won it. Second placing the Noble Comet. Third, Mr. Jazz. They were followed
a
in by
wonderful win.
Veloso.
I was
And
there that
behind
day.
them, Kia
Oh, that was
Murray, No
great.
Peer,
Sensational.
I can remember where I was. I was
Yes.
at the Mont Desert. It was bar in Takapuna. Can you remember where you were?
I can remember where I was. I was farming in those days, and we'd rush through milking in the afternoon so that we could be there in time to watch that race. So I was at home.
Where about was that? Where was
That
home?
was near Matamata.
Oh, well, that's a great horse country, isn't
It
it?
is indeed.
Anyway, well, that's where the love affair for a lot of New Zealanders and the Melbourne Cup started, wasn't it? For our generation, the baby boomer generation, we really came of, wow, this horse racing is great. So then we had a string of fantastic horses, and look, without even looking it up or Googling it, I can think of Sunline, I can think of Bone Crusher, our Waverley Star, Empire Rose. Now, a lot of those, John, weren't in the Melbourne Cup, but they were horses that made us proud in Australia, weren't they?
Indeed, indeed. And if we look through that period, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, they were halcyon years for New Zealand thoroughbred racing.
When are they coming back?
Well, hopefully soon. Hopefully on Tuesday, the 6th of November, 2012.
Now, every year in New Zealand, there's about 4,500 to 5,000 foals born. So
Yes.
we only need 2 or 3 to win that cup every year. So are we breeding enough young foals to actually to still do it?
One thing to remember is that a lot of very good New Zealand horses, young horses, get sold internationally before they've even been to the races. A lot of our other good, promising horses that have been to the races then get snapped up by buyers from Hong Kong and Singapore and even Australia and disappear from our shores. So one of the key factors in New Zealand horses winning the Melbourne Cup over the years is our environment, our green grass, our big rolling paddocks, our temperate climate, that type of thing. So obviously if you take away a lot of those promising horses from that environment, then it's much harder for us to get the numbers through to the Melbourne Cup.
So it's not 4,500, it might come down to 1,500. in the end.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
How many have made it to the Melbourne Cup this year?
Well, it's looking like maybe only 3. So we have 24 runners and maybe only 3, possibly 4, maybe 5 at the very outside will be New Zealand bred.
Do you think they're going to do it?
I think there's one very, very strong prospect and a second horse that is a good prospect.
What's the number one prospect?
The number one prospect is a 5-year-old mare called Lights of Heaven.
Lights of Heaven. Let's write that down, viewers. Lights of Heaven.
It's a 5-year-old mare by Zabeel out of a Volksrad mare. Now, Volksrad, like Zabeel, is an iconic New Zealand stallion. I think he was the champion stallion 9 times. Tough horses come from Volksrad. So it's a beautifully bred horse. My thinking on this horse is not purely emotional, and it's not purely because I'm a Kiwi. I think it really has a strong chance. Only carries 53 kilograms in the Cup, so it's in the Melbourne Cup, so it's a lightweight. Trained by Peter Moody, who's one of the top Australian trainers. Ridden by Luke Nolan, who's one of the top jockeys. I think it's got a really strong chance.
Now, our number 2 prospect?
Number 2 prospect is a horse, we're talking New Zealand bred horses, is Zabillionaire, who also is obviously by Zabeel with a name like that.
Zabillionaire, great name.
It ran a good race in the Caulfield Cup, and I think it's a good prospect. Not as strong as Lights of Heaven, though.
If it's not going to be a Kiwi bred horse, who's going to win this race, John? Let's have a look at the top 9.
I'm going to take 2 approaches to this, Gerard. First of all, I'm going to give 9 horses. Remember, of course, the field is not yet finalised, so there could be some changes. My strategy to viewers is to select 2 horses to win. So these are your anchors. Yes. One of those 2 horses must win.
Okay.
You then select another 3 on top of those 2 to run second. Yeah. You then select another 2 to run third. So we now have 7 horses altogether, and another 2 to run fourth.
Okay,
so we have 2 horses.
And then you can do combinations. This is great, John. We're going to do this, and you're going to come back on the show in 2 weeks' time, and we're going to see how you went, okay?
Okay.
Well, let's look at horse number 1. We need 2 anchors, don't we?
Here are my 2.
2 anchors, right?
Yep. And that's Lights of Heaven that we discussed before.
Yeah, Lights of Heaven.
And there's Red Cadeau.
Red Cadeau, who did well last year.
He ran second by a nose.
Now, the second spot, we need how many for the second spot?
Well, what I'm going to do here is give 7 other horses that I like, and obviously viewers can make up their own minds about what they want to select on the day, but here's the horses that I like. So, there's Dunedin, last year's winner.
Dunedin, yes.
Yep. Americain, who won it 2 years ago. There's 2 other imported horses, or European horses. One is called My Quest for Peace, and the other one is called Gatewood. And then on top of that, there's a couple of sneaky chances that are actually Australian bred horses that I think are well under the radar but have good credentials for this race. One of them is a horse called Ethiopia, who won the ATC Derby in April of this year.
Ethiopia.
And the second is Niwot, N-I-W-O-T.
N-I-W-O-T, Niwot, yes.
And my last selection is Zabillionaire.
Zabillionaire.
I'll be closer to the time. I'll be working out exactly where I put them for second, third and fourth. But those top 2 selections are Lights of Heaven and Red Cadeau.
Okay. So John, just before you go, you're a busy man. Just a little bit about what you do anyway. What is a thoroughbred syndicator?
Okay, well my company is called Fortuna, and we've been going since 2007. I've had a lifelong interest in thoroughbred racing. And what we do is we go to the yearling sales or horse sales in general and buy young horses that meet a certain criteria in terms of price and in terms of what we call type or athleticism.
So once we've selected a horse, you then buy the horse, and then you find 25 happy people to say, I want to be part of this.
Correct. So, for example, for somewhere between, say, $3,000 and $6,000, you can take a 5% share in one of our horses.
All the fun of owning a horse.
Correct.
Without all that expense of the...
Correct.
Because this horse is going to cost $100,000, isn't it?
That's correct. That's
wow.
correct.
So, can people give you a call, John? Can we put your name up and they can give you a call?
0800
0800
100
100
667.
667. Excellent number. 0800 100 667. John, I can only say thank you very much. Next week at the Melbourne Cup, I'm going to be armed with knowledge this time instead of absolute confusion. So,
all the very best, Gerard.
Best of luck to the both of us. And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Indeed.
Thanks, John.